I wasn't invited to my sister's wedding. I couldn't believe it when I saw the email, sitting there in my inbox like a dagger lodged right in my chest. The subject line read, "Claire's wedding invitation." My heart raced. I opened it. There were no warm words, no congratulations. Just one line: "We've decided to keep things small, and we feel it's best if you don't attend." That was it. No explanation. No reasoning. Just cold, blunt rejection. I stared at the screen for a long moment, unsure if I was hallucinating. My sister, the one I'd grown up with, shared my dreams and my tears, was getting married without me. Without even a conversation. Not a single explanation. Nothing. For a few seconds, I sat there motionless, the blood rushing to my ears. And then I felt something strange. Anger. Rage. How could they do this to me? My family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, had just excluded me from the biggest day of Claire's life. It wasn't just a wedding, it was her wedding. My own sister. My best friend. Or so I thought. I tried calling her. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to understand why. Maybe it was some mistake or a misunderstanding. But when I dialed Claire's number, I was met with voicemail. I tried again. And again. Nothing. It felt like she was avoiding me. I walked over to the kitchen window, trying to steady my breathing. The quiet hum of the city outside did nothing to calm the storm inside me. I never thought it would come to this. Not with Claire. I thought back to all those moments, years spent together. The long summer nights we'd lie awake talking about everything and nothing. How she promised I'd be by her side on her wedding day, just like I was for every other important moment in her life. But now it seemed that promise meant nothing. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Family was supposed to be the one constant in your life. The people who would always have your back. But now I felt like an outsider. It wasn't just Claire, either. Our parents, they hadn't even mentioned the wedding to me. They had just gone silent, like I wasn't even part of the family anymore. I had always felt like the third wheel in the family, like I was the one who never really belonged. But this was something else entirely. I had to get out. I needed to leave. My mind was spiraling, and I couldn't bear to stay there in the same place where I'd been abandoned. I grabbed my keys, pulled on a jacket, and left. No destination in mind. Just a need to escape. I ended up at the airport later that afternoon, not knowing where I was going, but knowing I needed to get as far away as possible. As far away from them, from this betrayal, from the lies they'd all been hiding behind. Iceland. I'd always wanted to go, ever since I read about it in a travel magazine years ago. Maybe it was the cool air, the distant mountains, or the idea of being completely alone. It didn't matter. It just felt like the right place to run to. The flight was long, and I spent most of it staring out the window, my thoughts racing faster than the clouds below. What had happened? How had things gotten this bad? My sister's wedding should have been a joyful event for all of us, a celebration of her happiness, a new chapter in her life. But it felt like everything had been torn apart without any warning. I couldn't make sense of it. The betrayal stung too deeply. And as I sat there on the plane, I started to wonder how much of this had been my fault. Had I done something? Was there something I had missed? Why had my family abandoned me so easily? The hours passed, but my mind didn't stop racing. I didn't even know what I was hoping for. Maybe I just wanted to disappear, to start over. Or maybe I was looking for something, some kind of answer, that would make it all make sense again. But deep down, I knew that I was only running from the inevitable, the truth. I landed in Reykjavik late at night, the air cold and crisp against my skin. It felt like a different world here, far from everything I knew. Maybe that's what I needed, distance, a complete break from the pain. I took a taxi to a small guest house near the city center, my mind still clouded with confusion. The first morning in Iceland, I woke up early, the light of the sun barely breaking through the thick clouds outside. I decided to go for a walk. The streets were quiet, the city still asleep, but something about the stillness calmed me. I walked for hours, not really paying attention to where I was going, just letting my feet take me wherever they led. And as I walked, I started thinking about all the moments that had led up to this. I thought about my childhood, my relationship with Claire, and our parents. They had always been supportive, at least at first. But somewhere along the way, things had shifted. It was like they were all on a different page now, and I had missed the memo. My sister had changed, my parents had changed, and I had no idea how or why. It was as if a wall had been built between us, and I was the only one who hadn't noticed. But I wasn't ready to confront that yet. Not here, not now. I was still too angry, too hurt. Iceland felt like a place where I could take a step back, breathe, and figure things out on my own terms. Maybe there was no simple answer. Maybe the truth was more complicated than I could understand at the moment. But I wasn't going to let this defeat me. I was done waiting for answers from people who didn't care enough to give them. This was my journey now. And I was going to find my own truth, no matter where it led me. For now, I was in Iceland. And that was the only thing that made sense. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The cold wind of Iceland blew sharply against my face as I stood in the quiet streets of Reykjavik. It was early, the city still shrouded in the pale light of dawn, and I couldn't help but reflect on how alien everything felt, just like the way I was feeling inside. Alienated, isolated, alone. It wasn't just the distance between me and my family that left me feeling cold. It was the emotional void that seemed to have formed between us over the years. I had always been close with Claire. She was more than just a sister to me. She was my confidant, my protector, the person I'd turn to with every little fear or joy. We grew up sharing everything, from clothes to secrets, from laughter to tears. I thought we understood each other better than anyone else ever could. But now I couldn't even understand how she could betray me so completely. As I wandered through the city, my thoughts drifted back to the days before everything had fallen apart. My family had once been a close-knit unit. We spent summers at our grandparents' cabin, gathered around the dinner table every Sunday for family meals, and celebrated every birthday and holiday with laughter and warmth. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. It was secure. I could still picture the long summers in the backyard with Claire. We'd spend hours playing in the sprinkler, arguing over which one of us was faster, then running inside to raid the fridge for popsicles. It was a simple life, but it was enough. Those days were the foundation of my memories, our memories. But somewhere along the way, that foundation had cracked. I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. It wasn't one single event. It was 1,000 little things slowly adding up, eroding the bond we had shared. I thought about my parents, Mom and Dad. They were always there for us, at least in the beginning. They worked hard, but they made sure we had everything we needed, emotionally and physically. We weren't a wealthy family, but we were happy. At least I thought we were. But as Claire grew older, things started to change. She was the perfect daughter, always polite, always excelling at school, always making everyone proud. Mom and Dad doted on her in ways I could never quite grasp. And somewhere in all of that, I started feeling like an afterthought. It wasn't that I was a troublemaker. I was, for the most part, a good kid. I had my moments of rebellion, of course, but nothing compared to what Claire did. She was the one who would sneak out, get caught in trouble, then charm her way out of it with that sweet smile of hers. I used to admire her for that. But as the years went by, I began to feel a quiet resentment grow within me. It was hard not to. I had always been the responsible one, the dependable one. I was the one who followed the rules, the one who kept my grades up, the one who helped Mom in the kitchen and Dad in the garage. But no matter how much I gave, no matter how much I tried to live up to their expectations, it was Claire who seemed to get the most attention. I guess I couldn't blame her for it. After all, she didn't choose to be the golden child of the family. But I started to resent it anyway. I started to feel invisible. It was like I was there, but not really. And the more I pulled away, the more Claire grew closer to our parents. That dynamic only deepened as we entered our 20s. Claire went off to college first, of course. She excelled, making friends easily, always surrounded by people who adored her. She met Kyle, the man who would become her fiancé. And to my surprise, when Claire brought him home for the first time, I actually liked him. He was kind, funny, and seemed to treat Claire with respect. But that was the beginning of the end, wasn't it? Looking back, I can see it now. My family's focus shifted entirely to Claire and Kyle. It wasn't malicious, but it was hard not to feel like the odd one out. Every time I visited home, it was like Claire and Kyle were this perfect little unit, and I was the outsider. I tried to make my peace with it. I tried to ignore the feeling of being left behind, but the cracks in our relationship grew wider. And the worst part? No one seemed to notice. Not Mom, not Dad, not Claire. And then came the day that changed everything. The day I realized I had been completely forgotten. It started innocently enough. Claire called me one afternoon, her voice bubbly as usual. She told me about the plans for her wedding, how she had been thinking about the guest list, and how excited she was. She asked me what dress I thought would look best on her for the big day, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. I agreed to help. It was her wedding, after all. I wanted to be a part of it, even though I was starting to feel like an outsider. But as the days went by, something started to feel off. Claire stopped answering my calls as often. When I did reach her, she seemed distracted, distant. I assumed it was wedding stress. Planning a wedding could be overwhelming, after all. But then, out of nowhere, the invitation never came. I tried not to take it personally at first. Maybe she was just caught up in everything. But days turned into weeks and nothing. The invitation never came. It wasn't like her. She would never forget about me like that, right? I asked my mom about it. She told me, in the most casual tone, that Claire had decided to keep the wedding small. That she and Kyle had decided on a very intimate ceremony. And then, without any hesitation, she added, "You understand, right?" I didn't understand. I couldn't. But I didn't argue. I didn't fight it. I just stayed quiet, hoping that maybe this was a mistake. That maybe Claire would come to her senses, realize how hurt I was, and extend the invitation herself. But that never happened. And that was when I realized that I wasn't just being excluded from a wedding. I was being excluded from their lives. From the family. It wasn't just Claire who was cutting me out. It was all of them. I stood on the quiet streets of Reykjavik, the cold wind biting into my skin, trying to make sense of everything. How had I gone from being Claire's closest ally to a stranger in her eyes? How had my family turned their backs on me so easily? I had no answers. But I knew one thing for sure. Something had to change. I couldn't keep running away from the truth. I was going to find out exactly why my family had done this to me. And when I did, I would make sure they would never forget the consequences of their betrayal. Iceland was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unreal. The landscape stretched out before me in a dramatic display of jagged mountains, frozen rivers, and sweeping plains. It felt as though time slowed down here, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. I was far away from everything I knew, far away from my family, from the pain they had caused me, and from the questions that kept gnawing at me. Still, even in this peaceful place, my mind wasn't quiet. Everywhere I went, I was reminded of what I had left behind: my sister, my parents, the wedding that I hadn't been invited to. I'd tried to distract myself with sightseeing, but nothing seemed to take away the ache that had settled in my chest. That was when I met him. It was a small cafe in Reykjavik, a cozy little spot I had stumbled upon while wandering aimlessly through the city. I was nursing a cup of black coffee, my eyes glued to the frosty window, when I noticed him sitting at a table across the room. He was alone, looking out the window too, his face marked with the same kind of pensive expression I was wearing. There was something magnetic about him, Something familiar, like he carried his own story of loss, of confusion. I couldn't explain it, but I felt drawn to him. He must have felt the same pull, because after a few minutes of staring, he glanced up and caught my eye. He smiled, a small, genuine smile. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice low but warm. I hesitated, but something inside me urged me to say yes. "Sure," I replied, gesturing to the empty seat across from me. He sat down, and for a moment we didn't speak. It was the kind of comfortable silence that suggested neither of us wanted to rush into conversation, but rather, we were both waiting for the other to open up. It was as if we both understood that we weren't there for small talk. Eventually, he broke the silence. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, his eyes studying my face, a hint of curiosity behind them. "No," I replied, offering a tight smile. "Just visiting." I needed to get away. From everything. He raised an eyebrow. "Everything?" I nodded. I wasn't ready to pour my heart out to a stranger, but there was something about him that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could. "Yeah, family stuff. It's complicated." "Family," he repeated, a trace of something darker in his voice. "I get it." His words lingered in the air for a moment, and I felt a strange kinship with him. "You've had your own share of complications?" He gave a slow nod, his gaze turning distant. "You could say that. I left my family a long time ago." I studied him, wondering what had happened to him, what kind of person he had been to make him walk away. He wasn't old, maybe in his mid-30s, but his eyes had a kind of weariness that didn't match his youthful face. His hair was messy, as though he didn't care much about his appearance, and he wore a thick sweater that looked like it had seen better days. But there was something oddly comforting about him. Maybe it was the quiet strength he exuded, or the understanding in his eyes. Either way, I felt like I could talk to him, even if just for a moment. "Sometimes, family can be more trouble than it's worth," I said, surprised by how easily the words came out. It felt good to finally say it out loud, to admit that things weren't perfect, that they hadn't been for a long time. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "You're not the first person I've met who feels that way. I think most people have their breaking point. Some people just reach it sooner than others." "I guess I reached mine," I muttered, glancing down at my coffee. The heat from the mug felt good in my hands, but it couldn't warm the coldness in my heart. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping just a bit. "What happened? If you don't mind me asking." I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal to the stranger who was already making me feel like I could trust him. But something about him made me feel safe. Maybe it was the way he didn't judge, the way he listened without rushing to fill the silence with his own words. "My sister, my family, they excluded me from her wedding," I said, my voice quieter now, as though admitting it out loud might make it more real. Like I wasn't even considered. "I found out by email." He didn't react with shock or surprise. Instead, he nodded slowly, as if he had expected me to say something like that. "That's tough. Family can really let you down sometimes." I met his eyes. "You know what it's like?" He gave a small, bitter laugh. "I do. Trust me, I do." It wasn't a boast or a claim to sympathy. It was just a statement of fact. And in that moment, I realized that we weren't so different. Both of us had been pushed to the edges of our families. Both of us had felt like we were just too much or maybe not enough. And we had both left to find something else, something better. "What did you do?" I asked, more curious now than ever. He leaned back in his chair, looking out the window again, his fingers absently tracing the edge of his coffee cup. "I left, packed up, and walked away. I thought I'd find answers, or at least peace, if I just got away from them. But peace is a tricky thing." "I think I'm looking for peace too," I said softly. "I just don't know where to find it. Maybe Iceland will give me some answers." He looked at me then, his eyes intense, almost searching. "You won't find peace by running away," he said quietly. "But you can find a piece of it. In moments like this." When you're able to stop for a minute and realize you're not the only one who's been hurt. I paused, his words sinking in. He was right. I had spent so much time running away from my family's betrayal, trying to escape it, but I hadn't really faced it. I hadn't allowed myself to fully process everything I was feeling. "What do you do now?" I asked, wanting to know how he had made peace with his past, how he had moved forward after leaving his family behind. He smiled, a faint, rueful smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I don't know if I've really moved forward, but I've learned that sometimes the best you can do is let go. Let go of the people who don't want to be a part of your life, even if they're family. And focus on the ones who do." His words were like a mirror, reflecting back at me everything I had been avoiding. Maybe it wasn't about revenge or figuring out why my family had excluded me. Maybe it was about accepting that they had made their choice and now I needed to make mine. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was beginning to understand that I didn't have to chase after their love or approval. I could find my own way. "Thank you," I said quietly, the words catching in my throat. "You don't know how much I needed to hear that." He nodded, his gaze softening. "Sometimes, we just need someone to listen." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. Maybe I was starting to understand what it meant to move forward, even if it was just a little at a time. And maybe, just maybe, Iceland was the first step in finding that peace. Iceland was working its magic on me in ways I hadn't expected. The landscape, the cold, the isolation, it all combined into a strange healing balm for my broken heart. But as I spent more time there, the gnawing thoughts about my family, Claire, and the betrayal crept back into my mind. They wouldn't leave me alone. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. My sister's wedding. The cold email. The feeling of being forgotten. The more I let my mind wander, the more I realized that there had to be more to the story. Why had they cut me out? What had I done to deserve this kind of treatment? Was it something I said? Something I didn't say? Or was it something bigger? Something I had missed along the way? I couldn't rest, not really, not with these questions eating away at me. After my conversation with the man in the cafe, whose name, by the way, was Thomas, I found myself contemplating the words he had said. "You won't find peace by running away." At the time, I hadn't fully grasped their meaning. I had thought he was just offering some general wisdom, but now, in the solitude of Reykjavik, those words seemed to have found a deeper resonance within me. I wasn't running away from my family anymore. I had been running toward something. Toward answers. Toward understanding. Toward healing. But running, even if it felt like progress, wasn't going to give me the peace I was desperately seeking. I needed to face the truth. Whatever it was. So, I did the only thing I could think to do. I reached out. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I knew it was the right thing. I sent an email to my mother, my hands trembling as I typed. Subject: "We need to talk." "Mom, I don't know what happened. I don't know when everything started to go wrong, but I feel like I'm losing you, losing all of you. I didn't receive the invitation to Claire's wedding, and I need to know why. Please, let's talk. I don't understand what's happening, but I need answers. I just want to know what happened to us. Love, Mia." I hit send, feeling a knot in my stomach. I wasn't sure if she would reply, or if she would even care enough to respond. But I needed to hear something from her. Anything. I needed to hear her voice, even if it meant hearing the truth that I wasn't ready to face. For the next few days, I waited, my thoughts constantly wandering back to that email. But there was no response. No phone call. Nothing. I tried to keep myself busy. I explored the town, took long walks by the coast, and visited the Blue Lagoon, hoping the warmth of the mineral-rich waters would provide some comfort. But nothing could ease the tension gnawing at me. I was becoming more and more restless. It was a week later, sitting in a small cafe by the harbor, that I received a reply. It wasn't from my mother. It was from Claire. Subject: "Mia, I'm sorry. Mia, I don't know where to begin. I didn't know how to tell you, and I never meant for you to feel this way. But there's something you need to understand about why things have changed between us. It's not that I didn't want you at my wedding, it's just that I couldn't have you there. Not with what you did. Not with how things have been. I don't know how to explain it, but I need you to know that I didn't make this decision lightly. Please understand that I love you, but you can't keep ignoring what happened. I hope one day you'll understand. I just can't explain it all now. But I promise you'll know the truth soon. Claire. I stared at the email, every word slicing deeper into me than I could have ever imagined. What did she mean by what you did? What had I done? I had no idea what she was talking about, and yet I felt a sudden surge of panic flood through me. What had happened that I didn't know about? What had I done? I read the email again, trying to piece it together, trying to make sense of it, but the more I tried, the less I understood. I couldn't remember doing anything that could warrant this. There had to be more to it. I had been excluded, shut out, but why? I sat there in the cafe, staring at the screen of my phone, my mind spinning. The weight of uncertainty hung heavily over me. I needed more answers. I couldn't leave it like this, not with so many questions, so much confusion. I felt a burning desire to confront Claire, to demand the truth. But I also knew that there were layers here I hadn't begun to understand yet. She was hinting at something I didn't know. She was trying to tell me that there was a deeper reason for her actions, but what was it? And why couldn't she just say it? Why did she have to hide behind vague words? Maybe there was more to her betrayal than I had realized. Maybe this wasn't just about a wedding. Maybe it was about something bigger. Something that had been simmering under the surface for years. I wasn't going to get the answers I needed by hiding. I knew that now. I needed to find the truth. And I was ready to face it no matter how much it hurt. The next day, I boarded a bus that would take me to the outskirts of Reykjavik. I had a plan. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for answers. I needed to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't sure where this would lead, but one thing was for certain. I couldn't stay passive any longer. The answers I sought were buried somewhere, and I was determined to dig them up. As the bus rumbled through the Icelandic countryside, the mountains rising in the distance, I thought about my family. My parents, my sister, and all the memories I'd once held dear. Whatever had happened, whatever had torn us apart, I was going to find out. And when I did, I would no longer be the person left in the dark. I would no longer be the one wondering what I had done to deserve this. I was going to face the truth. And no matter how painful it was, I would walk through it. The bus ride felt longer than it should have. It wasn't just the distance that stretched between Reykjavik and the outlying areas of Iceland. It was the weight of my thoughts, pulling at me like a sinking anchor. Every mile that passed took me further from the comfort of the city and closer to something I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. The landscape outside the bus window was stunning, the stark contrast of the white snow against the dark volcanic rocks almost surreal. It was a land that felt ancient, untouched, wild, and beautiful. But even here, amid the raw power of nature, I couldn't shake the chaos brewing in my mind. Claire's email kept replaying in my head. Not with what you did. What had I done? What was it that I didn't know that had set everything in motion? It was clear she wanted me to understand, but her cryptic words only left me with more questions. And, of course, there was the way she'd signed it. I love you. The words felt hollow, like they'd been hastily written without real meaning. I had to know more. The bus eventually reached its stop, and I stepped off, the cold air cutting through my coat, instantly reminding me of where I was. The small town was a far cry from the bustle of Reykjavik, a quiet, rural area where people knew each other's business. I hoped this was where I would find what I was looking for. I had a name. Just a name. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to work with. A woman who lived in this area, a friend of my family, someone Claire had confided in. Someone who might know the story behind the wedding exclusion, the real story. Her name was Fiona, and she was an old acquaintance of my mother's. According to my research, she lived in a small cottage near the edge of town. With little more than a name and a vague sense of where she might be, I made my way to her home. The walk from the bus stop was short, but every step I took felt heavy. The snow crunched under my boots, and the silence was deafening. There was a deep stillness here, a kind of quiet that seemed to suggest that nothing ever changed. But I knew better. Things had changed for me. For my family. Something had shattered, and I needed to find out what it was. I reached Fiona's cottage just as the afternoon light began to fade. It was a small, charming house, nestled among the trees with a stone chimney puffing out the faintest trail of smoke. It seemed peaceful enough. Too peaceful for the storm brewing inside me. I knocked on the door, my breath visible in the air. A few moments passed before the door creaked open, revealing an older woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Her hair was gray, and she wore a thick cardigan over a simple dress, her hands folded together in front of her. "You must be Mia," she said with a soft voice, as if she had been expecting me. "Come in, dear. I've been waiting for you." Her words threw me off for a moment. I hadn't told anyone I was coming, not even Claire or my mother. How could she possibly know? But I didn't question it. Maybe it was just one of those things that made sense in small towns, where everyone knew everyone else's business. I stepped inside, shaking off the cold. The warmth of the cottage hit me immediately, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to relax. But that calm didn't last long. There was a tension in the air, like something heavy was waiting to be revealed. Fiona motioned for me to sit. "Tea?" she offered, her voice soft, like a lullaby. I nodded absently, too distracted by the overwhelming surge of emotions inside me to fully process her offer. "Yes, thank you." She moved to the kitchen, and I took a seat by the fire, my hands still trembling. It was quiet in here, almost too quiet. But the silence was different from the one I had left behind in Reykjavik. It was welcoming, as though the space itself understood what I was searching for. When Fiona returned, she handed me a cup of tea, its warmth seeped into my hands, giving me a momentary sense of comfort. But it didn't last. I had come here for answers, and I wasn't going to leave without them. "I need to know the truth," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I don't understand what happened between me and my family. Why did they exclude me from Claire's wedding? I don't know what I did wrong." Fiona's expression softened, and she sat across from me, taking a slow breath before speaking. "Mia, I've known your family for many years. I know how much you loved each other, how close you were. But sometimes, even the closest families can fall apart." I shook my head, frustration rising in my chest. "I don't know what happened. All I know is I was cut out, and it feels like I've been erased from their lives. I don't even know why. My sister won't tell me. She says I did something, but she won't say what it is. Please, I need you to tell me." Fiona took a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly as though weighing how much to say. She set her tea down, her hands clasped tightly together as she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There's something you don't know, Mia. Something that's been kept from you for a long time." I felt my pulse quicken. "What do you mean? What is it?" Fiona looked at me, her expression filled with something close to pity. "There's been a secret in your family, something that Claire was never supposed to know. It's something your parents kept hidden from you, and now it's tearing everything apart." I leaned in, my heart racing. "What secret? What are you talking about?" Fiona hesitated, and I could see the internal battle playing out in her mind. "Mia, your parents, they've always been protective of you. But there's something about your birth, something that Claire doesn't know. Something they hid from her, and when she found out, it changed everything." I stared at her, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath me. "What? What about my birth? What are you saying?" Fiona took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for what she was about to reveal. "Mia, you're not the daughter your parents think you are. You're adopted." The world seemed to tilt on its axis, and the words didn't quite register. I couldn't breathe. "Adopted?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. I didn't know what to say. It felt like the walls around me were closing in. My life, the family I had known, the bond one had with Claire, everything I had believed in, had trusted in, was being shattered right before my eyes. Fiona's voice softened. I know this is a lot to take in, but your parents didn't want anyone to know. They were afraid of how Claire would react, of how you would react. And they kept it from you for years. But Claire, she found out, and she didn't take it well. She felt betrayed. I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. My mind was a whirl of confusion. How could this be true? How could I have lived my entire life believing I was part of this family, only to find out I wasn't? Fiona continued gently, Mia, you didn't do anything wrong. But everything changed when Claire found out the truth. That's why she's been distant, why she kept you from the wedding. She's struggling with something she didn't expect, something that turned her world upside down. I felt like I was falling into a bottomless pit. The truth was too much to bear, and yet I knew it was just the beginning of unraveling a much deeper story. But one thing was clear, my family's secrets had torn us apart. And now I had to decide how to handle this new reality. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? I sat there in Fiona's warm cottage, clutching the teacup in my hands as though it were the only thing keeping me grounded. The words she had just spoken echoed in my mind, over and over again. You're adopted. My family, my entire life. It had all been built on a lie, and suddenly everything I knew about myself, my place in the world, felt like it was unraveling in slow motion. The person I thought I was, the daughter, the sister, had been someone entirely different. I looked up at Fiona, her kind, weathered face watching me carefully, almost like she expected me to break down. But I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to collapse under the weight of the truth. Not yet. You're saying Claire didn't know? I asked, my voice hoarse. My thoughts were scattered, as though I were trying to grasp at something slipping through my fingers. Fiona nodded. No. Your parents kept it from her, from both of you. But when she found out, it tore her apart. She didn't understand why they kept it a secret. And I don't blame her, Mia. Finding out that everything she believed about her family was a lie, it's a lot for anyone. I stared at her, trying to process what she had said. Claire didn't know. Claire, my sister, the one I had spent my whole life beside, the person I had confided in, laughed with, fought with, she didn't know that I wasn't even related to her by blood. That she and I weren't bound by the same history. The realization hit me like a wave, knocking the wind out of me. What do you mean your parents kept it from me? I whispered. The thought of my parents lying to me, lying to Claire, made my stomach twist. I had always believed in their love, in their protection, in the safety of being part of this family. Now it all felt like an illusion, a carefully constructed web of half-truths and deceit. Fiona sighed softly. I'm not sure how much your parents told you, Mia, but when you were born, they wanted to protect you, to give you a good life. And they thought the best way to do that was to keep the truth hidden. But the truth always finds a way to come out, doesn't it? I could feel a coldness creeping through my chest as I imagined my parents, the people who had raised me, hiding such a monumental part of my identity. It was like a wound I couldn't yet see, one that had been festering beneath the surface for years, waiting for the right moment to tear open. But why didn't they tell me? I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. Why didn't they trust me enough to tell me the truth? Fiona looked at me sympathetically, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. They were afraid, Mia. Afraid of how it would affect you, afraid of how it might change the way you saw them, the way you saw Claire. They thought you would feel different, that you wouldn't accept the truth. And they were especially worried about how Claire would take it. She was the older sister, the one who always felt responsible for you. They wanted to protect her too. I shook my head. Protect her? Or protect themselves? How could they think that keeping something like this from me was protecting anyone? Fiona didn't answer right away. Instead, she watched me for a long time, as though weighing her words. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. Sometimes, people do things because they think they're doing the right thing, even when they're wrong. Your parents weren't bad people, Mia. They just made a mistake. And now it's tearing them apart too. I felt a surge of anger rise up inside me, followed by an overwhelming sense of loss. All these years, and they had never told me. I had lived my life, loved them, loved Claire, thinking that I belonged. But now it seemed like none of that had ever been real. How could I trust them again after all of this? But there was one thing that stood out in Fiona's words: it's tearing them apart too. It wasn't just me who had been affected. Claire had suffered too, just as much, maybe more. She had been kept in the dark, and she was struggling with her own demons, her own questions about who she was and where she fit into the family now that the truth had been revealed. I closed my eyes, trying to process it all, trying to understand why the secret had been kept for so long. Why hadn't anyone just told me? I wasn't a child anymore. I was an adult. And yet, here I was, feeling like a stranger to my own life. I need to talk to Claire, I finally said, the words heavy on my tongue. I didn't know if I was ready, but I knew that I had to face her. I needed to hear her side, to understand what she was going through. We needed to talk about what had been kept hidden from us. We needed to face this together, even if it meant tearing down everything we had built. Fiona nodded, her expression gentle. That might be the only way forward. But Mia, be patient with her. She's hurting too, just like you. I nodded, though part of me wasn't sure I could be patient. I had spent so much time being left in the dark, left behind. I wasn't sure how much more of this I could take. But one thing was clear: I couldn't move forward without knowing the truth. And the only way to get that truth was to talk to Claire. I stood up, my heart racing, and thanked Fiona. She gave me a soft smile as I made my way to the door, her words lingering behind me. The truth is a heavy burden, Mia. But once you carry it, it will set you free. You just have to be brave enough to face it. I stepped out into the cold, the wind biting at my face, and walked back to the bus stop. My thoughts were a whirlwind, and the questions kept flooding my mind. What will Claire say? How will she react? What does this mean for us now? I didn't know. But one thing was certain: I couldn't run anymore. The truth was out there, and I was going to find it no matter where it took me. As I boarded the bus back to Reykjavik, I realized that I was no longer the person I was when I had first arrived in Iceland. I had come here searching for answers, and I had found them, just not in the way I had expected. But the hardest part was still ahead of me: confronting Claire. Confronting the people I had once called family. And discovering what, if anything, was left to hold on to. The ride back to Reykjavik was a blur. My mind raced with thoughts of Claire, of what I had learned, of what I still didn't understand. My fingers gripped the edge of my seat, as if the motion of the bus could somehow ease the tension in my chest, but it didn't. The truth that Fiona had revealed to me, the secret of my adoption, had left me shaken, unmoored. Everything I thought I knew about myself and my family had been shattered. I felt as though I were standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down at an abyss of unknowns. But there was something else beneath all the confusion, something that pushed me forward, a strange sense of purpose. I had to talk to Claire. I had to face her. I had to understand her side of the story. Because the truth was, I wasn't just angry at my parents. I was angry at Claire too. How had she kept this from me? Had she known all along? And if so, why hadn't she said anything? The bus finally pulled into the station, and I stepped off, feeling the sharp bite of the Icelandic wind against my face. Reykjavik was busy, bustling with life, and yet I felt utterly alone in the middle of it. I didn't waste any time. I called Claire's phone, my heart pounding in my chest as the rings echoed in my ear. On the third ring, she picked up. "Mia," she said, her voice sounding like it always did, calm, composed, but with an underlying tension that I hadn't noticed before. "Claire, we need to talk," I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts to remain steady. Now, there was a brief silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. But then, she sighed. Where are you? I'm in Reykjavik. I need to see you. Please. There was another pause, this one stretching long enough for me to wonder if she would refuse. But then, Claire finally spoke, her voice quiet but resolute. Okay, meet me at the cafe near the harbor. I'll be there in half an hour. I didn't say anything else. I just hung up, feeling a mix of relief and dread wash over me. This was it. The moment I had been avoiding for so long. I had spent years building up the courage to ask these questions, and now, finally, I was going to get some answers. I made my way to the cafe, my footsteps echoing on the wet cobblestone streets as I walked along the harbor. The city was alive with the energy of tourists and locals alike, but none of it reached me. My mind was consumed by the thought of what Claire would say, what she would admit to. The cafe was warm when I entered, a small but cozy place with an old-world charm. I spotted Claire immediately. She was sitting by the window, staring out at the water. Her posture was stiff, her hands clasped together on the table. She looked exactly the same as she always did, beautiful, composed, but there was something different in her eyes. I could see it now, the pain I hadn't noticed before. I walked over to her, and she looked up as I approached. There was no smile, no greeting, just a silent acknowledgement of my presence. I sat down across from her, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. It was as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for one of us to break the silence. Finally, I couldn't take it any longer. Why didn't you tell me, Claire? Why didn't you tell me the truth? Her eyes flickered, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her composed exterior. I didn't know how to, she said quietly. I didn't know how to tell you. How do you tell someone they're not who they think they are? How do you say, you're not really my sister, not by blood? How do you tell them that their whole life has been a lie? The words hit me like a slap in the face, and I felt a surge of anger rise up in my chest. So you just kept it from me? You just let me live this lie, let me think I was part of the family, and you never said a word. Claire's face tightened, and her voice was almost a whisper. I didn't want to hurt you, Mia. I didn't want to lose you. Lose me? I repeated, my voice rising. You're the one who pushed me away. You're the one who didn't invite me to your wedding. You're the one who shut me out when I needed you the most. Her eyes softened, but there was no apology there. It wasn't just about the wedding, Mia. It wasn't about that one thing. It was about everything, the lies, the secrecy. I couldn't just pretend everything was okay anymore. I couldn't be close to you and act like nothing had changed. I felt my chest tighten with a mixture of hurt and frustration. So, you just gave up on us? Just like that? After everything we've been through, everything we've shared, you just decided it didn't matter. Claire looked away, her gaze fixed on the water outside. I didn't give up on us. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to fix me. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process her words. Claire, my sister, the person I thought I knew better than anyone, she was just as lost as I was. She had been carrying the weight of the secret too, and it had broken her in ways I hadn't understood. Claire, I don't know what to say, I said, my voice quieter now. I don't know what to do with this. But I can't keep pretending everything's fine. Not when I don't know who I am anymore. Not when I don't know where I fit into this family. She turned back to me then, her expression raw. I don't know where you fit either, Mia. I don't know how we're supposed to fix this, but I do know that I don't want to lose you. I can't lose you. The words hung between us, suspended in the cold air. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to reach out and hug her, to tell her that we could figure this out together. But another part of me, an angry, betrayed part, wanted to turn away, to shut her out, to protect myself from the hurt. But in that moment, I realized something. Claire wasn't the enemy. She wasn't the one who had kept this secret from me. Our parents had. And maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to heal from it together. But it wouldn't happen if we stayed apart. We needed to face the truth, even if it hurt. I don't know what happens next, I said softly, but I don't want to lose you either. We need to figure this out, Claire. We need to face it, all of it. She nodded, her eyes wet with unshed tears. I agree. As I sat there across from her, the silence no longer felt like a wall between us. It felt like a bridge, one that we both had to cross if we were ever going to rebuild what we had lost. And maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other, one painful step at a time. I left the cafe with a strange sense of both relief and dread hanging over me. Claire and I had talked, yes, but the conversation had only scratched the surface. There were still so many questions, so many things left unsaid, and deep down, I could feel the weight of all those unspoken truths pressing down on me. Our family was broken, there was no other way to put it. The secrets had created fissures that I wasn't sure we could mend, but at least now we were starting to confront them together. That was something. As I walked through the busy streets of Reykjavik, I couldn't help but replay the conversation with Claire over and over in my head. The way she looked at me, the pain in her eyes, it wasn't just about the adoption. It was about everything that had been left unsaid, everything that had been hidden, buried beneath the surface for so many years. I knew that the truth had hurt her just as much as it had hurt me. But there was a part of me, a small part, that couldn't shake the feeling that Claire had known more than she was letting on. How could she not have? She had been a part of the family long before I was, and if anyone should have been in the loop about the secret of my adoption, it should have been her. But she had kept quiet, and that silence had carved a deep wound between us. I needed answers. Not just from Claire, but from everyone. My parents, Fiona, anyone who might know the full story. I couldn't keep going on like this, floating in a sea of uncertainty. I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The next morning, I woke up early, the light from the Icelandic sunrise spilling across the room. I didn't sleep much. My mind was too busy turning over everything I had learned so far, trying to piece together a narrative that made sense of all the broken bits. The past few days had been a whirlwind of revelations, but there was still so much left unsaid. So many things I didn't understand. I knew where I had to go next. Back to my parents. It had been 2 years since I last saw them in person. I had kept my distance after the wedding incident, after the exclusion that had felt like a personal betrayal. But now, with the truth of my adoption hanging in the air, I knew I couldn't avoid them forever. I needed answers. And I needed them now. I called them that morning, the tension in my chest growing with every ring. It felt strange, reaching out after all this time, but I couldn't put it off any longer. The weight of this secret, our secret, had grown too heavy. When my mother answered the phone, her voice sounded strained, like she wasn't sure how to respond. "Mia, sweetheart, it's been so long. How are you?" "Mom," I said, my voice tight, "I need to come home. I need to talk to you and Dad. It's time we have a real conversation." There was a pause on the other end, and I could practically hear her mind racing. "Mia, please, you know we've been trying to give you space. Everything's been so complicated and—" "Mom, no more excuses." I cut her off, my frustration spilling out. "I know about the adoption. I know the truth. It's time to stop pretending. I need to understand why you and Dad kept this from me, why you kept this from Claire." There was another long silence, and I could feel her hesitation through the phone. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter this time. You know." "Yes, I know. Claire told me. She's been struggling with this too. We both need answers." I heard her sigh, deep and weary. "Mia, please, just come home. Your father and I will explain everything. We owe you that much." I didn't answer right away. A part of me wanted to scream at her, to demand more. "Why did you hide this from me?" But I knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. So, instead, I just said, "I'll be there in a few hours." I hung up without another word, already packing my things and preparing for the journey back to the place I had once called home. The house I had grown up in now felt like a distant memory, a place that had once been my sanctuary, but was now a site of painful memories and unanswered questions. The flight back was long, the hours stretching on as I thought about everything I had learned and everything I still didn't know. My thoughts kept returning to Claire, to the way she had looked when we talked. She was hurting, and I was hurting too, but we both knew that we couldn't keep pretending like nothing had happened. Something had changed, and there was no going back. When I finally arrived at my parents' house, the familiar sight of the old wooden home greeted me with a sense of bittersweet nostalgia. It looked the same as it always had. Nothing about the exterior had changed. But inside, everything was different. The warmth that had once embraced me felt cold now, distant. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing through the empty hall. My mother was waiting for me in the living room, sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. She looked older than I remembered, her face lined with stress and regret. My father was nowhere in sight. "Mom," I said, my voice steady but cold, "where's Dad?" "He's upstairs," she replied quietly. "He wanted to give us a moment to talk." I nodded, though the knot in my stomach tightened. I knew what this conversation was going to be like. I had been avoiding it for so long, but now it was inevitable. I had to face them. And I had to hear the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I sat down on the opposite end of the couch, keeping some distance between us. "So," I began, "tell me everything. Tell me why you and Dad thought it was okay to keep this secret from me for all these years." My mother's eyes filled with tears as she took a deep breath. "Mia, sweetheart, we didn't want to hurt you. We didn't want to lose you. But the truth, your adoption, it was complicated. We thought that if we told you too soon, it would change things. We didn't know how you'd react." I shook my head. "You should have told me. All this time, I've been living a lie, and you kept it from me. You kept it from Claire too." Her voice cracked as she spoke. "I'm so sorry, Mia. We thought we were doing the right thing. We thought we were protecting you both. But now I see how much damage we've caused." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout at her for lying, for keeping me in the dark for so long. But instead, I just sat there, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. "You didn't protect me, Mom. You just kept me in a cage, hiding the truth from me. And now everything is falling apart." She reached out, her hand trembling as she took mine. "I know, sweetheart. I know. But please, understand that we did it because we loved you. We thought it was the only way." A part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that their actions came from a place of love. But the other part of me, the angry, betrayed part, couldn't forgive them so easily. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," I said quietly. "But I need the truth. All of it." Before she could respond, I stood up, my mind racing. "I'll talk to Dad now." And with that, I turned and walked upstairs, knowing that this was the moment of reckoning, the moment that would change everything. The stairs creaked beneath my weight as I ascended to the second floor, my breath coming in shallow bursts. I could feel the heat of the moment press down on me, suffocating in its intensity. My father's office door stood before me, slightly ajar. I hesitated for a brief moment before pushing it open, the familiar scent of old leather-bound books and the mustiness of a room long untouched enveloping me. He sat behind his desk, his back to the door, looking at something in front of him, probably his work, as he always had. The same man I had known all my life, with his salt and pepper hair and the quiet confidence he exuded. He didn't turn around when I entered, but I didn't need him to. The tension in the room was palpable. "Dad," I said, my voice steady, but I could feel the sharpness of every word I spoke. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting mine. They were tired, weary, filled with a sadness I hadn't seen in years. "Mia," he said quietly, standing up as he did. "I wasn't sure you'd come back." "I had to," I replied, my jaw clenched tight. "I need answers. And I need the truth. Why didn't you tell me, Dad? Why did you keep the adoption a secret?" His expression faltered, just for a moment, but I caught it. He was trying to hold it together, just like Mom, but there was no escaping the truth anymore. Not for him. Not for any of us. I didn't want to hurt you, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I didn't want you to feel different. I didn't want you to feel abandoned. He paused, looking down at his hands, which rested on the desk in front of him, weathered with age and regret. And I certainly didn't want to destroy the family. I felt the anger rise in me, sharp and fast, but I held it in check. I couldn't let my emotions get the better of me. Not yet. But you did destroy the family, didn't you? By keeping the truth from me, you destroyed everything. I lived my whole life thinking I was part of something real, something I could trust. And then, this happens. I was almost trembling now, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. How could you do this, Dad? How could you let me live a lie for so long? He seemed to shrink before me, his broad shoulders slumping, as though the weight of everything he had done was finally sinking in. For the first time since I'd walked into this house, I saw him as something more than just a father. He was a man, a flawed, broken man who had made mistakes and had hurt the very people he was supposed to protect. I didn't know what else to do, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. We tried to make it work, tried to protect you both. But we were wrong. We should have told you, Mia. We should have told all of you the truth. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with regret. And yet, as much as I wanted to scream at him, to lash out in fury, part of me understood the complexity of it all. They had thought they were doing what was best for me. They had believed, in their hearts, that keeping the truth from me would spare me pain. They hadn't understood the pain they were causing by denying me the truth. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said softly, the words raw. I don't know how to move forward with this. There was a long silence, the only sound between us the soft hum of the house settling around us. Finally, my father spoke, his voice quieter now, tinged with something like resignation. I don't expect you to forgive us, Mia. But I hope you'll understand that we did what we thought was best. We were trying to protect you, and we failed. And now we have to live with that failure. I let the silence linger for a while, not sure what to say, not sure what I even wanted anymore. The truth had come out, and it had shattered the world I had once known. But even in the aftermath of all that destruction, a part of me felt something else, a strange, aching longing for reconciliation, for healing, for some sense of peace. I need to process this, I finally said, the words barely above a whisper. I don't know what this means for us, for me, but I need time. My father nodded, his face filled with a sadness that mirrored my own. Take all the time you need, Mia. We'll be here when you're ready. Your mother and I, we just want you to be happy. Whatever that looks like now. I couldn't speak for a moment, the rawness of everything still too much for me to bear. I turned and walked out of the room, my heart heavy, my mind spinning. I knew this conversation hadn't solved everything, but it had opened the door to something new. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I knew I couldn't keep living in the dark. I had to find my own way forward. As I descended the stairs, I found my mother waiting in the hallway, her eyes soft and vulnerable. She didn't speak, but I could feel the weight of her gaze, the unspoken words hanging in the air between us. I talked to Dad, I said quietly, my voice raw from the emotions of the day. He said he didn't know what else to do. He thought he was protecting me. And I think, in some twisted way, he really believed that. She nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. We thought we were protecting you both, Mia. We thought that by keeping it from you, we could spare you the pain of knowing the truth. But we didn't realize that it would hurt you more in the end. I wanted to scream, to yell at her for not telling me sooner, for allowing me to live in ignorance for so long. But I didn't. Instead, I just stood there, looking at her, trying to find a way to forgive her, trying to find a way to understand. I need to figure this out, I said, my voice trembling. I need time. My mother stepped forward, her arms open, but I didn't move. I was afraid that if I did, I would break. I wasn't ready yet. Not for a hug, not for the comfort she wanted to offer. Not when everything I knew had just been ripped apart. I understand, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'll be here whenever you're ready. I nodded, then turned and walked out of the room, my footsteps echoing in the quiet house. I didn't know what the future held for me, for my family. But I knew this. The past was gone. The lies had been exposed, and now it was up to me to decide how to rebuild from the ruins. As I stepped out into the cold evening air, I took a deep breath. It wasn't over yet. The truth had come to light, but the real work, finding peace, finding healing, was just beginning. And I was ready. Ready to face whatever came next. Ready to reclaim my story. Because in the end, it was my story to tell. The following days felt like a blur. The weight of everything, of the conversations with Claire, my parents, and the emotions swirling around us, was almost too much to process. But there was no escaping it. The past had caught up with me, and now I had to figure out what came next. I spent the next few days in the house, sitting in silence, trying to piece together the fragments of my life. It wasn't easy, but there was something cathartic about just being still, about allowing myself to feel the full extent of the pain without pretending it wasn't there. There were moments when I wanted to scream, to cry out for everything that had been taken from me. But instead, I allowed myself to be quiet, to reflect on everything I had learned. One evening, as I sat on the back porch looking out at the stars, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. I was angry. Furious, even. Angry at my parents for keeping the truth from me. Angry at Fiona for her silence, for the betrayal she'd let me walk through all alone. And angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. But I was also grieving. Not just the lies, but the life I had built upon them. Everything that had once felt certain had crumbled, and now I was left to rebuild from the pieces. I thought back to Iceland, to how I had run away to escape the pain. The vast, empty spaces there had made me feel small, but also oddly liberated. There, in the cold winds and silent landscapes, I had confronted my own fears. I had realized that while the truth had torn everything apart, it had also given me something precious, the chance to start over. I couldn't stay in this house, trapped in the past forever. I couldn't let my parents' mistakes dictate my future. But where did I go from here? How could I rebuild the trust that had been broken between us? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep hiding from the truth. Not anymore. It was time to face it head-on, no matter what that meant. A few days after that quiet evening, I found myself walking through the streets of Reykjavik again. The city, though small, had a strange way of making me feel both anonymous and deeply connected to the world around me. It was as if, in the vastness of the landscape, my problems became smaller, just another person lost in the tide of time. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I was going somewhere. I had left the house that morning, telling my parents I needed some time. The silence between us had grown since our last conversation, but it was a comfortable silence now. They had given me the space I needed, and for that, I was grateful. I had no plan, no clear path forward. But I was beginning to think that was okay. Maybe I didn't need to have it all figured out right now. Maybe, just maybe, it was enough to take it one step at a time. As I wandered through the streets, I stumbled upon a small art gallery tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The door was slightly open, as if inviting me in. I stood there for a moment, unsure, before stepping inside. The gallery was quiet, the air filled with the soft hum of a distant radio playing an old Icelandic song. The walls were adorned with vibrant paintings, each one telling its own story, each one speaking to something deep within me. I wandered from one piece to the next, drawn in by the colors, the textures, and the emotions each piece conveyed. It felt like the world outside had faded away, leaving only this space where I could breathe, where I could lose myself in something beautiful. Eventually, I found myself in front of a painting that seemed to capture everything I had been feeling: brokenness, longing, and the promise of something new. The colors were dark, deep blues and blacks, but there was a sliver of light cutting through the center, as if the artist had captured a moment of hope, of renewal, amid the darkness. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, lost in the painting, until the sound of footsteps behind me broke me from my reverie. I turned around to see a woman standing there, a gentle smile on her face. "You seem moved by this one," she said, her voice soft but warm. I nodded, unsure of what to say. "It feels like it's about finding light in the dark." She smiled knowingly. "That's exactly it. Art has a way of speaking to us, doesn't it? It's as if the pieces of our lives, the broken ones, find their way back together through the colors." I thought about her words for a moment, feeling their weight settle within me. She was right. This painting, like my life, was a mix of light and dark. It wasn't about erasing the brokenness. It was about accepting it, understanding it, and allowing it to be a part of the whole picture. "I'm Mia," I said, suddenly aware of how alone I had felt in that moment, how disconnected I had been from the world. But here, in this small gallery, something felt different. Something felt right. "I'm Freya," she replied with a smile. "If you like this piece, you might like the artist. She's local, but her work speaks to people from all over." I looked at the painting one last time before turning back to Freya. "Maybe I'll take a closer look," I said. We walked around the gallery together, discussing the artwork and the emotions it stirred in us. I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't expected. The walls I had built up around me felt less solid in her presence, and I allowed myself to breathe again, just a little easier. By the time I left the gallery, I knew something had shifted inside me. It wasn't an answer, not exactly, but it was a new sense of clarity. The truth about my family had come to light, and it had torn apart the world I once knew. But there was something on the horizon, something in the distance that called me to keep moving forward, to keep searching for my own path. As I walked through the quiet streets of Reykjavik, I realized that while I couldn't undo the past, I could still shape my future. The pieces of my life may have been broken, but they weren't lost. And with each step forward, I was starting to put them back together. The days in Reykjavik passed slowly, yet they felt like the first moments of clarity I had experienced in years. The weight of the truth, the years of secrecy and silence, had been a heavy burden, but with each day that passed, I felt that burden begin to lift. It wasn't gone, not completely, but it was more manageable now. The sting of betrayal had dulled into a quiet ache, one I could bear. I had been back at my parents' house a few times, sitting with them in silence, trying to absorb the fragments of our broken family and understand the distance between us. The atmosphere wasn't easy, but it was less tense. They didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. But there was a quiet understanding in the air, a sort of mutual recognition that this was going to take time. That I wasn't going to simply forgive them and go back to the way things were. Not yet, and maybe not ever. But that was okay. On one of those mornings, I woke up with a sense of determination I hadn't felt in a long time. I had spent enough time hiding from the pain, enough time letting it weigh me down. It was time to act. It was time to rebuild, not just with my family, but with myself. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at the woman staring back at me. She was different from the girl who had walked into this house weeks ago. The sadness in her eyes had softened, replaced by something stronger, resolve. It wasn't about fixing everything, not all at once. It was about taking small steps, about moving forward in ways that mattered. I picked up my phone and dialed Claire's number. It rang a few times before she answered, her voice sounding exhausted but relieved to hear from me. "Mia? Is everything okay?" she asked, the concern clear in her voice. "I'm okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "I wanted to talk to you. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about us and about what comes next." There was a long pause, and I could almost hear her processing my words. "What do you mean?" "I think it's time we stop letting all this divide us. I don't want to keep living like this, Claire. I don't want to keep holding onto all this anger and hurt. We can't change what happened, but we can decide how we move forward." I could hear her exhale, as though the tension she had been holding in for so long was starting to release. "I've been thinking the same thing," she said quietly. "I didn't want to hurt you, Mia. I didn't want to push you away. But I was so angry too. Angry at Mom and Dad. Angry at how everything was kept from us. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to fix it. I get it, I said. I was angry too. But we can't keep running away from this, Claire. We're sisters, and we've been through too much to let this tear us apart. We have to face it together. I want that, she said, the emotion thick in her voice. I don't know if I can forgive them right now, but I want to find a way forward. I don't know if I can forgive them either, I admitted, but I'm not going to let that stop me from living my life. I can't let them define who I am anymore. And I can't let this pain define who I'm going to become. For the first time in a long while, I felt something like peace settling over me. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from resolving everything, but it was the kind that came from acceptance. From the realization that it was okay not to have all the answers. It was okay to be in the process, to be unsure. We talked for a long time that day, and even though we didn't have all the answers, I felt closer to Claire than I had in years. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things could be okay. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of phone calls, visits, and long conversations. There were moments when I felt like everything was falling apart again, like I was being pulled in too many directions. But there were also moments of clarity, like when I sat down with my parents again and, for the first time, spoke honestly about how their actions had affected me. I didn't scream at them. I didn't demand answers. I just spoke from the heart, sharing my pain, my confusion, my anger. And they listened. They didn't try to defend themselves or offer excuses. They simply acknowledged the hurt they had caused. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same page, not that everything was fixed, but that we were finally being honest with each other. And that honesty, though painful, was the first step in rebuilding. As the weeks turned into months, I realized that healing wasn't a destination, it was a process. There were no quick fixes. There was no magical moment where everything fell into place. But there were moments of growth, of change, of small victories. The anger that had once consumed me didn't disappear overnight, but it began to loosen its grip. Slowly, the darkness that had clouded my mind began to fade, replaced by light slowly, but steadily. I took time to travel, to explore the world outside of the confines of my family's story. Iceland had been the first step, but it wasn't the last. There were places to go, people to meet, and a future to build. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I spoke to Claire regularly, and while our relationship wasn't perfect, it was evolving. We were learning how to navigate this new chapter in our lives, how to be sisters again. It wasn't easy, but it was real. I also began to understand something important. I didn't need to have everything figured out. I didn't need to have all the answers or all the solutions. Life was messy, and that was okay. What mattered was that I was still standing. What mattered was that I was moving forward, no longer defined by the secrets of the past. The truth had shattered my world, yes, but it had also given me the freedom to rebuild it. To take the pieces of my life and reassemble them into something stronger, something truer. And in that rebuilding, I had learned something crucial. It's not the broken pieces that define us, but how we choose to put them back together. And with that knowledge, I stepped forward into the unknown, ready for whatever came next. Ready to write my own story. Because this time, it was mine. All mine. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?